All right, guys and girls, we are back on the AlwaysMoto Podcast. It's episode 59, and the whole episode is available over on your favorite podcast platform. But we are jumping into the emergency department here, and obviously we're doing this combined across the podcast and the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Subscribe and like the video below. It helps us a lot. If you're listening on a podcast, follow the feed and make sure you leave a rating on the podcast app if you're able to. But know that they're on both those platforms. So let's jump into this emergency department. It's probably the reason you're here on our AlwaysMoto podcast or YouTube channel is to see the emergency department done by myself as a physiotherapist with a little bit more insight into these injuries that the riders in the AMA Pro Supercross series here are having, and just to get a bit more in depth with our injury knowledge and sort of find out what's happening, when, how long, all those sorts of good bits and pieces. So let's jump into the emergency department right now.
The emergency department. All the injuries, all the gory details, and when they'll be back on track. It's the list you really don't want to be on.
You do not want to be on this list. I say this every week here in the emergency department, and this week is even more important because, as you'll see when we talk about a couple of these injuries that happened here from Nashville, they are now in a very big predicament as to whether they're going to be able to make the start of the outdoor series. We're now in that window where we're transitioning, and the closer we get, the worse things get for any significant injuries, or even the closer we get, even some minor injuries are going to start putting a little question mark over whether you're going to be ready for that round one of outdoors at Parla at the end of May. So we are now within 4 weeks. So things like minor bone fractures are going to be a 4 to 6 week recovery time frame. They're going to start making that first round very difficult to get to, and particularly to have any bike time before you roll up to that first gate drop. So some things to think about, and obviously some ways that these guys need to try and avoid the injuries. Not that they're going out there looking for them, but you want to make sure you get through this series healthy and make it onto that gate for the outdoors so that you have the best chance come the outdoor season, because your fitness is going, your confidence is going. You don't want to break all that by having a break or an injury, because it's just going to throw you out the whole time. So let's get into this emergency department. Obviously, Nashville was Crashville, like we said earlier in the podcast, and we got that from Cade Clayson's post on Twitter. I did ask him. He never responded, so I'm going to take that as a yes, that I can use it right now. So thanks, Cade. No worries, mate. Now, let's get some things to note here from Nashville. Aaron Plessinger, that Red Bull KTM rider, the number 7, he had that incident at the previous round at East Rutherford. He tried to race Nashville, didn't work out for him. We suspect that he will be back for Denver this week, but again, it'll be a touch and go situation. He might try to ride untimed sessions and practice and qualifying. He might not make it through again. We'll have to wait and see. But if he does ride, he will be the only one of the KTM group in that 450 class, and then in the 450 class with the KTM group that will be on track, because we've already lost Marvin Muscan, Cooper Webb, Malcolm Stewart, Christian Craig, and Justin Barcia. It's not been a great year for the KTM group. And then if we look a little bit further into the 250 class, because obviously we've just had the announcement that we'll talk about here in a few seconds for Pierce Brown, but we've got Pierce Brown out, we've got Michael Mosman out. So the Gas team is basically wiped out for Supercross now. They might as well park the truck up and just get ready for outdoors. But we've also then had injuries to Jalek Swoll. We had some issues with RJ Hampshire earlier in the season that he didn't go so well with. So that whole KTM group has had a rough run in 2023 with injuries. So yeah, we'll have to see if Plessinger can make it back and be the only 450 guy on track for that group, or if he doesn't make it through again and maybe he tries again in Salt Lake, or if they just park the whole system up and just wait for the outdoors to start. We'll have to see how that all pans out for them. Now, John Short injured a hand, or re-injured a hand injury that he's been carrying for a little bit now in Nashville. Missed out on those main parts of the night program, but he is told us that he'll be in Denver, so hopefully that means he is all good to go. But I dare say he'll be still managing that when it comes to Denver, but he'll definitely be at Denver, because obviously that Pulp MX Privateer Challenge is financially rewarding for him to be there, so he'll be trying to ride, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through this show. Now, out from injuries following Nashville, obviously the big one that started this all rolling in Nashville with Crashville was the Cooper Webb incident. Now, unfortunately, Cooper Webb did sustain a concussion. He's on concussion protocol, but he's already taken the steps to remove himself from the next 2 races and eliminate himself from the series. So he's moved to do that. Now, the AMA concussion protocol, we've spoken about it heaps on the podcast. It is a process. It is started by your physician to say that once you've had no symptoms for 24 hours, you can then commence the 5-stage return to ride program, and each of those stages needs to take a minimum of 24 hours. So he could have, in theory, been ready for this weekend's race if he was symptom-free to start that process on Sunday, Monday. But if he wasn't feeling at that point, or he just basically maybe he has some other issues and he took that as the out, but we don't know that for sure. We're just speculating on that side of things, but the concussion is definitely confirmed. Maybe the symptoms were significant enough for him to not be able to start that protocol early in the week, and he just took that as the reason for him to sit out the rest of the season and get himself healthy, which for a concussion is a fantastic idea. You don't want to have that lingering around because that will make things very difficult for you. You don't want to have any of those sort of memory loss issues, proprioception issues, balance issues, what else? Any of those problem-solving sort of issues, everything that the brain controls, vision, hearing, it can all go wrong following a concussion. So you want to get rid of those things very quickly, and Cooper Webb has taken the right steps, in my opinion, to do that, which is great. Moving on, Justin Basha, the Troy Lee Designs 450 rider, off the dragon back, managed to break a collarbone, and he will be out for the remaining rounds of Supercross. Now, this is where things get sticky for these riders who have had decent injuries at this time of year, between that transition point. If Justin gets this surgically repaired, it is a 4 to 6 week recovery time frame. In theory, at about 2 weeks, you will feel great from their collarbone repair work by the surgeon, because you will have that plated. It will be plated across, it's all screwed together, so it's held solid. The bone is still broken. It's held together by the plate, so you're artificially inflated at that point. So you technically could ride. It's down to whether you can tolerate the pain, and if you want to risk basically impacting that plate and re-breaking it, or breaking the collarbone in a different position around the plate and then creating more of a problem for yourself. So whether it is going to be ready or not in time is one question. Whether he wants to take that risk, whether he can manage the pain, whether he even has any bike time before he rolls onto the gate is another part of this as well. So there is a chance that he is on the line for round 1. There is also a chance that he is not. We won't know for about another 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll have to see how that plays out. You probably won't hear anything about him until that week of the first round. And that will be basically because that will be his first opportunity to be back on the bike in a sensible time frame, let alone whether he's physically capable or not as well. Exactly the same scenario goes for Rock River Yamaha's Benny Bloss. He broke his collarbone as well at the same venue at Crashville. So he is in exactly the same boat. We spoke with Benny direct, so we have confirmed that he has gone ASAP to California to get his plated, and his aim is to be ready for round 1 at Parla. But again, you have to see how that post-op side of things goes. It's not as straightforward. It's not a guarantee. Every surgery that is out there has some inherent risk. Obviously, infection is one of those possibilities. Non-union, other pain, other irritation. Maybe the surgeon gets something involved and it damages something else. There's plenty of things that can go wrong. They talk to you about it when you do those surgeries, and they say, this percent chance of this is less than 99, it's 99% never going to happen, blah, blah, blah. There is that 1% chance that it could happen. So we have to see how it all goes. Ideally, it goes perfectly well. Don't want to be Debbie Downer, but we've just got to point out some of these things occasionally so everybody gets an accurate picture and how badass these guys are when they do come back from these injuries in a short space of time. They've taken all these things into account. All right, next on the list, and it's just come out today, Jason Anderson of Monster Energy Kawasaki. He's had a couple of crashes recently. He had a practice crash. He had a crash in practice at Nashville, and he had another crash in the heat race. One of those crashes, I'm not exactly sure which one from his update, but one of those crashes has led to a couple of broken vertebrae in his neck. Now, this is a significant injury. Anywhere, anytime you break a vertebrae in any location in your spine, it's not good. One, because obviously the risk is you can have issues with your cord and become paralyzed in some form, partially, fully. Different layers means different innervation levels for the nerves, and obviously the higher up it goes, the less function you can have. Luckily for Jason, this is deemed as a non-displaced fracture. Now, non-displaced means that the bones are broken, yes, but they are still sitting in exactly the spot that they should be. They haven't shifted and they haven't impacted onto that cord or any of the associated nerves that come out from the cord through things that are little holes that are called foramen in the vertebrae. So, good news for Jason is that is non-displaced. Bad news is he broke 2 vertebrae, C5 and C6, which is just at the base of the neck for anyone who doesn't know where they are. So for Jason, that is, again, it's a 4 to 6 week type injury, potentially because there's 2 and it's your neck. It's probably going to be more like 6 or 6 to 8 weeks. But again, it depends on his healing rate. Every person heals at a different rate. He might be able to rest really well and not irritate it, and it will heal quickly. He might do other things like take some calcium supplements. He might use a bone stimulator. He might take some other sort of herbal, non-traditional medicine to try and improve bone healing. And that might speed up the process. He might do hyperbaric chambers, those sorts of things. He might do nothing at all and just rest, and it might still be exactly the same time frame. You never know. As much as there's all these options out there for alternate medicines, you don't know if any of them actually work for you. Now, will he be back for the start of outdoors? I doubt it. I reckon you will see Jason Anderson around round 3, maybe even later. Just depends on how that process goes, because one, he's got to get that 6 weeks or so of non-riding time, but then he's got to obviously build back up fitness. He might have to test the bike. He just might need some general bike time to feel comfortable before he goes and hits outdoors, because he might not have done very many laps on an outdoor track, given he's been still deep in Supercross season. But he might have done plenty. He might be completely ready, and he just needs a week to get up to speed again, and away he goes. So it's going to be around that round 3 mark for me, I reckon. That's my call at this stage. We'll see how that works out. But it is a massive injury. There's no two ways about it. Broken vertebrae, it's huge. Don't discount it. These guys are superhuman. And for him to ride with that as well, once he rode the LCQ in the main event with it, that's pretty impressive. That's some serious adrenaline running at that point. Adrenaline is amazing. It will make you override just about anything. So he has done an amazing job. But glad that he's recognised that he's got the scan and he's realised there's actually a problem there, and he's pulled himself out. So he's out for the last 2 rounds of Supercross, and like we said, potentially not back till partway into the motocross series as well. All right, next one on the list, Grant Harlan, the Rock River Yamaha rider. So Rock River Yamaha has both lost their 450 riders. He unfortunately dislocated his shoulder in a crash in the whoops. We spoke to Grant. He was trying to get some MRI scans done this week. We haven't heard back from him. We did offer to actually help him read and interpret the scans as to how bad they are, so that if he could potentially ride this week, we could help suggest whether that would be appropriate or not. But the thing with dislocated shoulders, everyone's different, but whether it comes out cleanly or whether it tears the labrum as it comes out, or whether you tear the rotator cuff or your bicep as it comes out, those are all factors that implicate how quickly you recover from it. If it comes out and goes back in without too much hassle, and it goes back in a relatively short space of time, you can potentially get straight back into your activity. Maybe you just take a day or so and let the swelling and the associated pain from the dislocation occurring settle, but generally you can be okay. But if it's when those other things occur, you tear the labrum, you rip a rotator cuff, that's when you've got to have surgery. Or if this is the 2nd or 3rd occurrence of a dislocation, then you've got to look at how you make this thing stable enough to stay in place to still do the sport, which is then where we have things happening like stabilization surgeries, where they tighten the cup up, or they even put a piece of bone in the front of it, which is called a Ladege procedure, when they blocks the position where the shoulder usually comes out anteriorly. So interesting to know, lots of people have that. For Grant, we checked, this is the first time for that shoulder. So fingers crossed, there's nothing else on those scans, and it's starting to feel really good already, and he may be at Denver. But if there's anything else on there, we'll find out hopefully in the next few days. So check our social updates for that. He might be out. We'll have to wait and see. It might be season done. All right, not from Nashville, but midweek crashes that we found out about in recent times. Pierce Brown, we sort of mentioned that a little bit earlier with that whole KTM group. Pierce Brown's put out an update that the Friday before Nashville in practice, he broke his hand whilst doing some outdoors. Unfortunate, but potential risk. Obviously, there's a lot of accidents during training. That's not the surprising part of Pierce Brown's injury update. The surprising part was that he has actually been carrying a meniscal injury for about a month or so. Oh, and we're just going to have a little pause here on this because we've managed to somehow double over on top of something that shouldn't be where we're recording. But we're going to keep it going because that's what we do. We just make this thing work. And we'll just pause this here. And we'll get going again. Why not having all the stuff ups just keep going in through the podcast and the YouTube video when we make things a little error? Anyway, back on the Pierce Brown. So the interesting thing that we were talking about is that meniscal injury that he's been carrying for about a month. Nobody knew about it. Was that the reason for some of his inconsistent results? You'll never probably know. But he's had the chance. Obviously, he's going to have this bone in the hand broken. It's a 4 to 6 week injury recovery time frame. He's got this other injury. He's done the smart thing, in my opinion, and he's gone and got that meniscal injury fixed because he's already out for another reason as well. So hopefully by the time he gets back, the meniscal repair is about a 4 to 6 weeks time frame as well. So they're going to match up reasonably well, but then he's obviously going to have 2 areas to regain fitness from. So he'll probably be a few weeks before he gets back onto the bike into the outdoor season. So if we talk about that time frame, he's going to be somewhere around that mid-season point, somewhere around Redbud, I reckon, that he will potentially be back on the bike. So he will still get a fair few rounds in, but not going to be there for the whole championship, unfortunately, for Pierce Brown. Now, another one that we found out about, and we've spoken to him to try and get him onto the podcast for next week for our injury check-in. It's Bobby Piazza. He managed to break a hand. It's a boxer's fracture. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what a boxer's fracture is, it's your 5th metacarpal, which is the outside here, and it's the neck. It's down nice and close. So when you have a boxer, they hit here, it jams back, and it breaks the neck of the 5th metacarpal. He's done that. So usually that means he's closed the fist and punched it into something on the ground, or as he's fallen, he's sort of jammed it. That's broken that 5th metacarpal. Now, he rode through at Nashville, which was awesome. Didn't have to pull out later in the evening, later in the day program, I should say. Night show, day show, same blah, blah, blah. You got what I meant. He's going to be in Denver. He's going to try and ride through that. Unsure as to how he goes, whether he heads to Salt Lake or not, but we'll find out hopefully when we check in with him next week for next week's episode. So check back for that, guys and girls. Now, for Bobby too, he asked us to give him a little shout out. So it's at Bobby Piazza, Bobby, BOBBY-PIAZZA on Instagram. And if you check our show notes, we're going to drop his Venmo to give him some support to get to these races. So please check it out. If you can donate to him, please do so. All right, now making returns this week for Denver. Like we talked about with Aaron Plessinger, it's a maybe. We'll see how it goes. He might be there. He might be there and try and not be able to. So you have to keep an eye on how that goes throughout the day. And the other maybe at this point is Alex Ray. Alex Ray had a couple of injuries this year. He broke his thumb and he broke a finger. He's had both of them surgically repaired. He's about 3 weeks from that repair. He's just, I think, a week now from having that plate removed out of his finger. And he potentially might try and ride Denver because of the privateer Pulp MX challenge. There's a lot of money on offer, and he could potentially get a bit of that. So this is driving a lot of guys to be there, and they will be making every effort to ride. Now, whether Alex physically can or not, he will find out probably on that day of the Friday of the Pulp MX challenge. So check it out. Just keep an eye on it. Whether he does or he doesn't, we will not know. The other one is is a guy we interviewed earlier in the season. He had a crash at Anaheim 1. Lewis Macias. He is potentially going to be back this week in Denver, which is awesome. He had those lung and rib issues. He's finally over it. He's been on the bike for a few weeks now. We've checked in with him, but we haven't got a response as yet to confirm, but he looks like he will be at Denver. That was his intended plan when we last spoke to him about 3 weeks ago. So ideally, he's there ready to go for Denver. And one more aspect that we're going to cover this week on the emergency department here is some updates from the recovery path. We've seen Dylan Walsh, who has that leg injury, he's 5 weeks post-op. Things are going well, which is awesome to hear, and he's hoping to be back on the bike real soon. But I still think that's probably a few weeks away yet. But Dylan sounds very positive about the recovery from that surgically repaired leg, which is awesome. The other 2 updates are Austin Faulkner. If you've been watching his vlogs, he had a check-in about 2 weeks ago now, and he's on track really well. But he is yet to be released to do anything really significant. He's just doing some cycling, which is, great for the psyche because you start feeling a bit normal. But I speak for myself from my injuries in recent times. It's nice to do some of those normal sort of things. So he's just up to that point. He's not up to bike riding just yet, as in moto riding. And the other one is Cameron Mcadoo. Obviously, he had that shoulder dislocation as well. He tore a few muscles around that as well. He is only a few weeks post-op, but he has started therapy. We spoke about that a couple of shows ago where he was delaying the therapy start because of potentially from specialist, recommendations. Good old throat sore here. Been talking too much today. But he has actually been seen moving that arm around, which is great. We're using some electrical stimulation to assist that and start to reactivate those muscles. Nice little technique there. But he's a long way back from getting back to action yet. But he's been seen to be making some steps in the right direction, which is awesome. All right. Now, quick shout out while we've got the chance. We haven't done it in any other point in the show of the full podcast episode, which is episode 59. We were part of a MX Vice interview today with Ed Stratman, which was awesome, where we went through a lot of the injuries that have happened in the AMA series. So if you get a chance, check out the MX Vice social pages and their YouTube channel or their podcast. It'll be on a few different parts of their stuff. It's about an hour-long chat with me and Ed, and we go through, like I said, all those injuries and a few more stats. So feel free to check that out. It was an awesome chat, and that's why my voice is probably a little sore. I've spent most of the day talking about moto and then obviously the day job as well. So good stuff, but check it out. All right, let's jump into Dave's diatribe.
This is Dave's diatribe. What's a diatribe? A diatribe is a forceful and bitter attack against someone or something. So keep your head down. You might be next.
You could be next. That is right. You could be next. This one's an interesting one, right? So normally we have a go about something that's strange that's happened. Obviously, there was you're probably thinking I have a go about the Cooper Webb removal part from the medic crew where they were holding his helmet whilst they were driving him off, trying to stabilize his neck. And obviously, you think you'd put a C-collar on if that was the case. I've had that chat on Twitter. If you want to check it out, go and check out my Twitter feed. We've been engaged in that for a little while. There's a lot that could be done there. It's a tricky situation, but if you feel that you need to stabilize the helmet, you should be stabilizing the neck properly with a collar. That's my opinion. There's lots of other things that we can do post that I would really like to see implemented, like a medic that is a part of the TV crew with a review booth so they can watch these things and feed that back to a radio to the guy that's going to the guy on the track, and then also link that to the AMA as to whether they then red flag it or not a bit quicker, which they might have a little bit of that process, but I think it could be improved a lot. And then also implementing a bit more of a removal process for the riders, because at this stage it's hit and miss. You've seen it a few times now where a rider's put a C-collar on but then they've let him walk, or that he didn't have a C-collar on but they're holding the helmet. Just let's make it a standard procedure. Now, the Dave's diatribe that I really want to get to is actually from the MotoGP world. So obviously people are probably going to switch off here because we've switched genres. But Jack Miller got on the podium, which was awesome, right? In the last round, he got on the podium. But Jack, can we ease up on the shoeies, mate? Like, they're a fantastic way of celebrating when you win. But if you just get on the podium and get third, let's try and avoid the weird crap that's going to come out of your boot that you've been wearing for 40 plus minutes in a GP race, where, and then drinking out of it so you can, try and get yourself tetanus or some sort of dengue fever. I'm just making up random viruses here now. But nobody needs you to do that more than you need to. So if you want to start winning, yeah, sure, do shoeies every race. But let's just back off on them when they're on the just for podium finishes, right? Like let's keep it for a special occasion. All right, hopefully Jack hears that. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get some feedback from Jackie. But look, it's great that he did a good result, man. That's awesome. I'm glad to see you on the KDM doing well. Just ease up on the shoeies. All right, let's take a break on the AlwaysMoto podcast. We'll be back with more. We've got our check-in with Gage Linville from his injury recently at Atlanta. That'll be in a separate YouTube video, and it's all part of the AlwaysMoto podcast, episode 59, that you can check out on your favorite podcast player. Thanks for watching, guys and girls. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and that you're following and subscribe and leaving a review of our podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you shortly after this break.